So welcome everyone. Just make sure that all our panel members can actually hear me. So can we have a yes or a thumbs up? Great. I can see both your microphones are muted. If you want to unmute, we might get underway. Brilliant. Okay. So when I was asked to put this panel together and put a panel together on digital security and compliance for allied health practices, my first thought was, how the hell are we going to fit that into about 40 minutes? So I won't waste a lot of time on an introduction for myself. We'll move straight into the questions. I've mentioned and introduced Leslie. Neil, I might get you to do your own intro because I don't have a bio for you, so, you know, keep it short but interesting.
I'm just a cyber guy, right? I'm Professor Neil Curtis. I'm a Professor of Cybersecurity at the University of Southern Queensland. I'm a former Chief Security Officer with DXC, ex-military, ex-police. And I'm in at the PHN as the Digital Compliance Manager at the moment. So that's a really rewarding space to be. I can actually, there's a lot of really good people and a lot of good work actually moving forward. So that's where we're at now.
What I might do is, I've sort of broken today's discussion into a couple of different areas, and that largely kicks off from a discussion I was having with a colleague a few months ago. We used to have a marketing slogan and a few banners made up about the future of health is digital, and really that's not accurate these days. The future of health is now. Digital health is now. It's happening. Really we've seen a lot of rapid changes over the COVID period, adoption of different things. People are using wearables, and I think Mel mentioned a lot of that stuff this morning. So I think really it's get on board and or risk being left behind. I put the line in, but we need to move with certainty but underpinned with knowledge. If I can maybe ask Leslie, in the allied health space, Leslie, what's been your experience of digital health in recent years?
Well, I worked in health primarily in up until about 10 years ago, and I'd go into the office and log onto my computer and have one password, and it was very secure because it was a big IT department looking after it. And then I went into the world of private practice and had to navigate a number of different systems. I think I've got about maybe 20 different systems I have to navigate, and that's growing. I think the most recent system that I've started using is Heidi Health, which is a AI clinical note-taking system that reduces my workload enormously. But progressively all these new systems that I'm using, I've got to have, 100 different passwords. I've got to have a lot more diligence around, kind of changing my passwords. There are a lot of things out there. I'm contracted to agencies that use different systems. So I'm navigating probably about 20 to 30 systems from 10 years ago, having one system that I logged on with one password. So that's the big change for me in the last 10 years. And from someone whose training is mostly clinical kind of practice, it's been a huge learning trajectory for me to enter this world of me being my own IT department and navigating all these systems. So I guess it's exponential, the growth in using various IT systems and managing that.
Yep, excellent. Thank you for that. And I think that's something I know when I've been out talking to clinicians. That's something they're facing every day. It's how do I manage this multitude of information sources and different systems, and unfortunately we also work in a world where most of them don't talk to each other. So that's one of the battles that we face. Neil, I apologise. I think I might have stolen your question early on there that you've got from my notes. So but I might move to Mel if I can. Mel, you've had a number of different positions in your career. And what's been your experience, and to probably reiterate, I suppose, what Leslie's saying?
Thanks. It is. So I have had 23 years at New South Wales Health, And within that time, I've worked at a district, I've worked for eHealth, I've worked for HealthShare, I've worked at Ministry, and now I'm at the PHN, which is a very, very different lens. If I think about what Leslie has just said, is that, when I originally came into health, it was when they were looking at putting in, within Hunter New England, the single EMR system, which was moving from an old VAX sort of solution to a digital solution. We still didn't have a single sign-on then, but you also still had different systems at that time. I think health have come a long way where you have moved towards that single sign-on. If you think about SDPR that's coming, I think in terms of a sort of that my sort of lens and my experience is that there's so much, we're in a period of rapid growth and rapid change, particularly in the digital space. And health is struggling to keep up. So if you think about corporate and you look at corporate spaces, and I've done looked at a lot of corporate work as well, is they are rapidly evolving, rapidly changing, rapidly meeting that kind of challenge. Things like single sign-on, the use of AI, cybersecurity, they're really keeping abreast, but you can't always do that in a health setting, and it's much more challenging in that we're struggling to keep up with what's happening outside of the health space. I think that fragmentation is one of the biggest challenges that we do have in that space. And some of it's because in that sort of sphere of influence, sometimes we don't have influence because you look at, Commonwealth, you look at state levels of government, you look at individual providers. That's the ongoing kind of challenge in that space. And I've seen the fragmentation increase because everyone's trying to solve a problem. Everybody's trying to solve a similar problem, but they don't always talk to each other. So that fragmentation and interoperability, you can have different systems, but they also don't talk to each other. So that's kind of been my experience. It's evolved dramatically from when, the evolution of digital health from when I first started working in health to now has grown exponentially. It's phenomenal. But we're still behind other countries and, other I've lost my, but other kind of disciplines, if you think about outside of that health context.
Excellent, thanks for that, Mel. Neil, I might just ask you, from a cyber sense, can you give us a bit of a feel of the recent trends from the cyber perspective?
Yeah, I think, so what we're actually seeing these days, it's a huge growth area, right? It's like AI, it's kind of here before you know it. And the maturity level keeps on increasing, the tools keep on increasing, the technology keeps on building on capability and the like. But and it's very difficult to stay abreast of it when you pump AI into the landscape and you get that automated offensive attack sector and vector and surface area. But I think we have to wind back a little bit and take a different perspective. It's not so much about what tool sets and what do I need to do to be more secure. It's about how do I shape my business up in foundation and some of foundation first. So there are some maturity questions, and we're all here to help people make that jump. I know that from my time in Queensland Health and South Australian Health, when I was in the cyber landscape, and in government, particularly in my government areas around, asking the right questions and finding out what you actually need to know. It's a little bit difficult when you're a small to medium because you don't play in those corporate sectors so much. You play in your own sector. So things like questions like, a great piece of software might come across your deck or capability and you're looking at a cloud service and then the last thing you ask is where's your data going? Or even who has access to my data if it's not me. So there's some questions and some fundamental frameworks that need to be spoken about, put in place, understood. And when you turn around as a small to medium business and you think about the technology like was said before, around the amount of technology, the completely different landscapes you have to work in on a daily basis, the complexity around that, trying to secure that, it's a different world. But I think, as a small to medium, there's your business you need to focus on. Like you are a clinician, for example, you focus on the area that you're particularly working in. If you're a business owner, you need to try and move out of that. Instead of working in it, you need to work on it. And working on it's about understanding your technology. Whereas when you're working in it and working with patients, you don't have time or an understanding or even the bandwidth in your headspace to do that sort of stuff.
Excellent. Yeah, no, I think that's really good advice to get those foundations in place, understand the technology before you put it into place. We talk about regularly putting your policies and procedures in place, making sure they're documented, baseline some of your staff training and things like that, make sure you've got a good knowledge with your staff have got a good baseline knowledge. So I think that's really valuable advice. Thanks for that, Neil. Leslie, working in that clinical space, and I know with my background working in general practice, I would have some clinicians that, self-admitted Luddites, don't want to change. Others love a shiny new object and want to grab it and play with it straight away. If you were looking at a new digital tool for your business, what are the considerations you would play through at the moment?
Well, I think probably my biggest priority from just a really practical point of view is time consumption. If you're a single business owner, you're really looking for tools that will be helpful in running a business that is going to save you time. But I think every system I've utilised in my business, it's actually taken a long time to actually understand it. Yep. So, and I agree with what Neil was saying is being a counselling service, I think it's really important to know where your data, where your data is being stored, and security is really important as well. So I think they're probably the two biggest things for me is security and time efficient and time saving devices that are going to help me run my business, but are also easy to use as well. So most of the systems that we kind of get provided are very complex, and it takes me out of my business quite a lot of time to do training and to understand it and to implement it, and so it is quite a time-consuming thing. But I think a lot of the benefits are really there. Heidi Health's a really good example that I entered that really cautiously. The AI note scribe. I was using an old Remarkable before that, which just turned my notes into text. That was really quite secure, tapped into my computer system, but Heidi Health has been an absolute lifesaver and life changer for me. But again, security of the data is the flip side of that. Is knowing that data is secure.
Yep. No, thank you for that. Brilliant. All right, Mel, and I think using one of many hats that you've worn in the past, if you were looking from an IMIT compliance perspective when you're looking at any digital tool, and this may be from a larger organisation perspective, but I think it applies, the same principles can apply down into small business. What are the key considerations or the basic considerations you would be looking at before a purchase?
I think regardless of the size, I think the first thing is trying to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. There's a lot of bright and shiny products out there where people try to sell you this to say it's going to solve all the problems of the world. But I think you truly need to start with understanding what problem are you trying to solve, and does this solve the problem? And making sure that, I think you touched on, Leslie, that change aspect. Sometimes you don't want to buy the most overcomplicated system if it's not going to fix your problem and it's going to be too hard to implement that change. I think the other things that you really need to consider is things like where your data is stored, and we've already kind of touched on that, but in Australia, so Australian healthcare data has to be stored in Australian soil. There's a number of providers out there in terms of cloud providers that do meet that need, because that is a requirement that we have to store data on Australian soil. The other couple of things that you do really need to think about is, and it's going back to that problem, is if it's a clinical, say, decision-making tool, if it's linked to a clinical outcome, you do also need to take into consideration things like if it's a wearable device, does it need TGA approval? Those types of things, because not everything does require TGA advice, and I'm not sure if anyone, if you have an Apple Watch, there's a function on there. It's actually blocked in Australia because it doesn't have TGA approval and it meets those requirements. The other thing is cost, is that often you get given a bright and shiny tool and we'll give it to you at a bargain basement price, but sometimes those things, as you know, add on, particularly as with SaaS products, which are software as a service. Those costs are monthly, year-on-year costs. So truly look at what that longer-term cost could mean. It could be good to pilot and test it to see does it solve your problem, but understand what you're signing up for. That would be my kind of the big thing. And then the final piece is making sure that whatever you put in, you actually have the right support. So if you're a practice with a single person, is making sure you've got the right vendor that you can get the technical support from, because it's the last thing you would also want to do is implement a solution and not be able to get support when you do have problems, particularly if you get locked into a contract. So understanding what that support model looks like, understanding where the data is stored, particularly if it's a SaaS product, and understanding are there any clinical considerations that you have to take into account, i.e. where you would need to from a digital solution or a medtech solution, TGA requirements, patient care, are there any clinical safety aspects you have to kind of be concerned about, and really making sure it solves your problem, because the last thing you want to do is spend money on something that you've got caught up in the hype, that is bright and shiny without actually meeting your needs and solving a problem. Yep. And we do that at the PHN for anything that we do. And in health, we did that all the time. So we would do, it's just the size is slightly different, but really understand the user stories, the user requirements, what is that problem that you're trying to solve.
Yep, so all of those things are scalable.
Yeah.
That's great. Neil, I might move on to you if you don't mind. A bit of a two-part question. I had a practice owner recently tell me that their email security was Bill Gates' problem, and another one tell me that their email couldn't be compromised. Without mentioning the words jail too many times, can I get you to give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay. So let me give you an analogy about the Bill Gates conversation. You buy a Ford motor car, you speed down the street, you get pulled over by the coppers, you get a ticket. Who's the you give a ticket to Holden and Ford? No, you wear the ticket yourself. So if you drive the technology, you own the technology, you're responsible for it. You don't often see anybody have that conversation around, if I drive a piece of technology or I drive a piece of equipment, or it's on the equipment owner or the equipment builder or provider. It's like having firearms and saying, firearms kill people and spoons make you fat. So I think, there's conversations around that. Look, email is a big problem. It's probably the biggest breach area. And it's not so much because of the email systems, it's that we lack a context around the security and tool sets that we can actually implement. Now, my voice is going through, so I do apologise. So as a small to medium enterprise, you don't normally have access to the proof points of the world, Proofpoint being a big email security system. So you don't get a lot of that filtering of the bad stuff coming into you, but you do get it to an extent from other big players like Google and the like. And I think it's very, you need to be aware of that. Don't ever trust your email system or what you're getting through it. Always second guess and question everything. And if you're in doubt, make a more formal application, like ring somebody up or send an email back out and try to understand what that email is about, especially in areas like finance. But fundamentally, the onus is on you. If you own your own business, you are subject to legislation. If you're subject to areas like the GDPR from the EU, and that came out a little while ago now. It's fairly old in terms of that, but it's a $20 million fine. And they don't care who you are, you'll still cop the fine if you breach that security protocol. And that's more with EU space. However, it does pertain across Australia. It does. We do have laws and legislation. Now the boards are suddenly woken up that they're on the hook for it, so it's becoming a bit more like work health and safety, where if an injury or accident happens where somebody gets hurt or dies, then it's generally the directors that go to jail. So there's one jail for you. But the fines are quite extensive. But more importantly, I think it's reputational. So for a lot of industry and businesses, especially in health, that's the context comes around reputation. If you can't maintain a reputation, which is one of the 5 buckets of your business, then your reputation, your capability of actually getting clients goes in the tablet, goes in the drink rather, in the drain. So it's a bit of a you need to have a mature head around what you actually do in your cyber landscape and in your work landscape, but you can't blame somebody who makes the technology that's their fault. And it's similarly to a big organisation. You can't sit back and go, look, I work for Queensland Health, for example. It's their problem. Like I'll just play badly on their system, and they can sort it out. It's actually going to be very much on you as a user. And there's enough training and education out there and awareness. There's no excuse for not knowing about cyber these days.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Leslie, I know when we had a conversation earlier in the week, you were unfortunately delivered an email that from a practice that you received an email from a general practice who'd had their email compromised. Are you happy to talk a little bit about that experience and how you got that resolved, but also maybe the impact on your business as well?
Yeah, well, it certainly brought cybersecurity to the forefront of my head almost overnight. I received an email thinking it was a referral, and it ended up being a compromised email. Friday afternoon, I learned a lot of the psychology behind these emails. So it came in late Friday afternoon. I was pretty tired. I was half packing up. I had a couple of clients to go. So clearly they've got really good psychology operating in the back of their mind. And I wasn't really thinking. I opened the email and it was asking me for passwords and all sorts of things. And I'm going, why is this not, why is it asking me this? And fortunately, I had the sense at the end of it to think, well, I'll ring the referring agent and see if they referred that. And they weren't answering the phone. They were clearly answering a lot of other phone calls at the time. So it took me a little while to twig, that this was a scam. And this is a while ago now. So it certainly brought it to the forefront around the diligence that you need to check every single email that comes in. It wasn't long after that, and maybe a couple of months after that, I got the lovely tax department email, and I just lodged my BAS that morning, and then I got that email in the afternoon, and I went, oh, that's interesting, and Nellie clicked on it and realised that no, that's another scam, So I certainly put some more layers of security in my email system after those two incidences. But more importantly, I think what I learned, I had a couple of meetings with Hector, who was meant to be on the panel. And I think the psychology is the most important part, is understanding that they're going to come in at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon when you're most exhausted, that they're just going to change one letter in their email address. They make the PDF look like a PDF, but it's not a PDF. And to kind of look at all those little minute details of an email in a busy practice is hard to do, to read your, I'm admin, I'm the IT department, I'm also the cleaner, so to go to that level of reading emails in detail is something that I haven't been used to doing. I trusted the systems. I don't trust the systems anymore. I read everything in detail. I don't open anything unless I check the email, drop down and check where the email's from. I'm much more diligent now after those few experiences. And like Neil was saying, I'm the driver, so I take a lot of responsibility for that now after that experience.
Cool. We've just about had a new guest on our panel, but thank you for that, Leslie. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because sometimes it's not easy to talk about some of the things that have actually gone wrong in our own environment. So really appreciate you sharing that and being so frank with us. And I think it really highlights that we talk about data security. It underpins everything that we do in this in health, and it's really the cornerstone of what we do. And I think really, if we look at it in plain facts, at most levels, email probably isn't an appropriate tool for data transfer between practices for referrals and things like that. I think we really need to have a look at things like secure messaging, e-referral solutions and things like that. And we can help you with those at the PHM. We can have a talk to you about those sorts of things. There's a lot out there in the marketplace. So I think it's worthwhile having that conversation. Can't answer all of those questions probably at the moment, but we'll certainly try and address some of those as they come through. Mel, a question for you, and it's in a similar vein to what I asked Neil. And this was originally going to be addressed to Hector, but we'll give it a go anyway. We'll see how we fly. What would you see as the weakest point of failure at a practice level when it comes to data security?
People. I think from my lens, I think people are probably the weakest point. And similar to you, Leslie, is, I've spent a lot of time working in technology, but I now have seen the worst case scenarios of where it fails, and usually, very rarely is it from a ransomware attack. Very rarely is it through like a denial of service attack, or where there's somebody sitting in the background hacking away. It's usually through the weakest point, which is a person. And which unfortunately, for me, is I have a zero trust. So to the point that I actually will miss emails sometimes. I'll miss text messages, because it's not just email. We speak so much about email, but there's so many things that come through text. And it is like today, I think it's today or yesterday, I got an email saying that I have Qantas points that I need to use. Click on this link and I can use all my Qantas points. So there's so many avenues that it attacks us through now. So I think that, that's the weakest point. And I know I often get asked, well, how do you deal with this? And I feel like I'm very much pessimistic now. Like in everything that I do, I'm rather negative. It sounds terrible. That's not my natural personality. But every message I get, every email I get, I sense check. There's ways to be able to try to solve it. So thinking about, did I buy something off Amazon? No. Am I expecting to get a message about this? Am I, if it's sort of a multi-factor, so things like, in your practice, it would be putting in things like multi-factor authentication, so that when you are logging in securely as well, even if they get through that first line of defense, they don't have two points to be able to get through. You have to think about it and approach it in sort of that negative sense, but regularly changing your password. So even if that happens, your passwords regularly change. So therefore, the chances are minimised. It doesn't stop it. You can never stop it, because this is big money out there, and people are always trying to do that. But I've probably gone way off track.
No,
I think that it is that
that's brilliant.
My lens, and I've talked about this often, even in my old organisation. So my old organisation, we had about 8,500 employees, and we had employees that worked from all the way from cleaning linen, folding linen, delivering food, all the way up to corporate roles. And it doesn't matter what your role is, the weakest point is the person. All it takes is them to click on a link on a text message, put in their work details, and there's a vulnerability, and there's a point that they can get in. And the same with email. So it is a sad environment that we live in, and it's a pity that we are this way. COVID has escalated it dramatically, because we moved all online. We moved to a lot more digital solutions. But I think that, putting in those basic controls around changing your password regularly, making sure that it's a complex password, making sure that if whatever system you use has multi-factor authentication, so if they do get through one point, they can't get through the second point. Making sure that you don't send clinical information via email, don't send critical information, link it back to a secure path, or use a secure messaging system for e-referrals and those types of things. It's not it's the only way you can minimise the impact.
Yep. No, that's great. No, I think you're dead right there, Mel. And I think the question's probably, and I can't see the questions because my screensaver's now come on, but it's probably going to be, how do we address that people problem? I would say to you, if you to the people watching today, have a look at the Australian Digital Health website. They've got some great free training on there that you can baseline for your staff. Australian Signals Directorate's also got some training. They're all free, and they're chunked down into bite-sized pieces. You can get certificates for them and everything like that. And when I'm talking to practice managers and practice owners, I'm usually saying to them, use that as your baseline and run that as part of your induction. Run it for your existing staff. Don't forget your clinicians, because they're programmed to want to help, and often they're the ones that can click on the email or do that, click on something they probably shouldn't, because again they're just trying to help somebody. So I think that's some really good resources. So have a look at those two websites. We've talked about the downside. We probably should look at the upside, just because we're here to promote digital health and digital technology. And often we do get bogged down in that daily grind and don't necessarily look back and celebrate some of our successes. And I know Leslie touched on a couple earlier, so I might just throw to you again, Leslie, and just get you to reiterate some of those positives that have come out of embracing some of the digital technologies within your practice.
Well, I've been in private practice for about over 10 years, and I started out with the old handwritten notes. I decided to go back to old school, and then I realised storage was going to be a huge problem. So I quickly moved on to a online tool, but it has grown. There's so many wonderful things out there. I moved to Remarkable to take my notes, and that was a nice in between and a wonderful tool. But that was displaced in a matter of a couple of years to things like Heidi Health and other kind of scribes and note-taking tools that are just, I spoke to an economist, and I'm not an economist in my brain, and she said, I said, I'm saving myself a day a week in terms of doing my kind of notes and, uploading them and writing them from pen and paper, then typing them in, and I'm a slow typer. And she said, well, you just increase the value of your business by 20%, so that was I wouldn't have even thought of it in that way. But, there are those kind of things that makes, I can see more people, not so much for the financial side of things, but more for the fact that I have capacity to take on referrals. So I think that's been a real game changer, I guess, in terms of my practice and what I can do. In fact, Heidi Health makes me more present in my practice. I'm not quickly taking all those notes. It actually takes an accurate record of the session, but I'm actually literally more present in those sessions for my clients. So it has actually been a really big game changer.
Yep, and I've heard that from a number of clinicians who are using AI scribes, that it actually helps them be a lot more present with the patient. They actually have a better interaction because they're not tapping away at their keyboard. So.
Not a plug, but we are trying to capture that data at the moment. So we've got an AI-enabled initiative where we're actually trying to capture from the clinician perspective, as is in general practice, does that make a difference to workload, to their experience, and from patients, to be able to capture patient experience, to say, has this improved your experience in the session? So did it improve it? Because you have that more face-to-face eye contact, and you're not distracted with taking notes and trying to write things down. So we're actually trying to capture data. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump on that, but we're trying to get some evidence to support that, because a lot of it is anecdotal at the moment, and we want to make sure, because we see it as a big opportunity, and are really advocating for it.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Mel, again, probably looking back at whether it might be with the PHN or in a previous life as well, positives, again, that technology brings to different areas of business. We've heard in that clinician-facing side from Leslie, but in an administrative function as well.
I love technology. You heard me speak before. I'm a bit of a techno geek. Everything I live, even in my personal life, I drive a smart car. I love iPads. I love phones. Like technology, it has been, a really big. It's been a game changer as well. And I think that in my career, the evolution of it is when I remember and this is going back years ago, for the organisation I used to work for, all of our HR records, all of our workforce records, everything was paper, and we would have I remember walking into the aisles. I'm short, like I'm 5 foot, and so it's not hard to be taller than me. But we would have boxes piled up that were way taller than me, like 6 foot high, of employee records. And we would have, because we did it for the whole of New South Wales, and we would have warehouses full of records. You then get issues with mould. You then get issues with trying to refine the data. We moved that digital. That to me is the biggest change I've seen in technology, is going from that analog, manual kind of a process to a digital solution. That then creates efficiencies, and then it allows people to rather spend time on doing the kind of the manual piece and, you know, trying to read it, to be able to digitizing it. In my previous organisation, is as I left, we had implemented digital workers. So digital workers, where we would replace repetitive tasks that we would have a person do with what we called a digital worker. It was a robotic process automation. It had some level of AI in it, but it's being able to make that change. So therefore our people could focus on customer experience, focus on the exceptions, rather than being, you know, in that grind of invoice comes in, reading the invoice, manually entering it in. You know, a digital worker would come in, it would read that, it would manually put it into the system, and it would just the exceptions they would focus on. So it not only creates, and I don't want to say talk about people efficiencies, but it creates time efficiencies. And that means that you can actually do additional things. And that was a very large organisation. In a small organisation, there's ways you can do that, and we heard about it this morning, where you can spin up some of those things that are quite simple using products that you probably have access to now. That's where I've seen the biggest efficiencies in automation and digitisation. So that whole analog to digitisation, and then you go from digitisation to automation, and then you move into that AI space, is where there's opportunities and the positives. And you can see I get excited about it. As I said, I'm a geek at heart. But it is one of those things that I see phenomenal opportunity and phenomenal, you know, there's immense gains that we can have, which allows people to come back to the truth, is just facing people and working with people.
Yep. So exciting times ahead. Neil, have you got anything you'd like to add in that space? Good news stories.
Well, actually, I just got my first daily spam email today as we were talking from Discovery Card saying, we've noticed a change in your recurring charge for Spotify, $130. I'm like, who's Discovery Card? Delete. as we were just talking there, Mel. So, you know, you brought me on. So there's a few things I want to sort of give some context to. You've got to take away the perspective that this is not a personal thing. There is not a person attacking you per se. They're not looking at Leslie going, going to get her, going to sort her out, going to take all our money. This is off-the-shelf stuff. So what I mean by that is, in my world, unfortunately, we have this thing called the dark web. You've probably all heard of it. But we have a shopping cart in the dark web. I can go shopping for malware, for distributed denial service space. I can go for anything I want. I can buy offline, like a supermarket, like Amazon. I can go to the Amazon on the dark web and go, I want hacking devices and hacking malware packages and the like. They come with a warranty. Get that, right? So if it doesn't work, I can go back and get my money back for spending money on trying to hack somebody else. When I put this out there, we'll put it out in the millions. So we'll simply go buy 100 to 200,000, if not more, 100 million email list, and we'll just send to everybody, and it'll just go out. Now, if you're the weakest link, that's when you're going to get hit. So don't think that you've got an email like that one I just got from Discovery Alerts about Spotify, that somebody's actually personally trying to get me. It's not the case. It's actually randomised. So they are just seeking the weakest link. And this is where, when Leslie received that email on a Friday afternoon, when you're tired at tax time, so if you've got your own business, right, guess what's coming your way this month and next month? You're going to get smashed. Christmas time, you get smashed. Black Friday or Cyber Monday, you get smashed. Why? Because they're targeting that rotation of, you're too busy, this is a too good to be true offer, and you're going to smack into it. And when you're tired, you're not focusing, it can happen. It can happen to anybody, including people like myself in cyber. So don't think that it's attack against you or against your business. If it is, it'll be a nation-based attack, or it'll be a complete hack attack hack attack, but it'll mainly be from those who actually got interest in your specific area. Now, that doesn't happen very often, and when it does happen, there's not much you can be able to do about it, depending on what systems you have. But just know it's not personal. It's not against you. Like, the person who sent that to you doesn't have a clue what you do. They just want to get in. And that's why what Mel said, have an operations area of 8,000 people or staff, and they target everybody. Why? Because it's not just the cleaner might be the most secure person you ever have. They may have an email address that they answer, but it's a broadcast attack. It's across every sector. And if you open the door to them, they don't care. Once they're in, they're in. And then they start moving laterally against the network. So, don't think it's about you or what you do.
Yep, I think that's really good advice. No, thank you for that. We might just go for a couple of questions here. Leslie, question from someone. Have you used NovaPsych, and how did you find it compared to Heidi?
I've only used
haven't used NovaPsych? That's okay. No, that's all good. No. I think you might have actually covered this one with Heidi. The question was, what system helped you reduce your workload? And from what you're saying, Heidi has certainly been something in that direction, so an AI scribe tool has worked in that. Is there anything else that you'd want to add to that?
Oh, well, just following on from what Mel said, I'm using a system called Halaxy, and a lot of health providers use Halaxy. But just, my journey over the years, a lot of automation in that, like the text reminder, the SMS reminders, the automation of invoicing, the plug-in to Xero, because I've been with it for so long, I've just watched all these growth areas that has, again, just reduced my administration load. So what I would just normally use as a diary now is kind of doing all these other automated kind of parts of my business. The workload's just completely reduced, which allows me to focus on what I need to focus on. Yep. So I think, that those kind of systems have lightened my load enormously.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. Neil, one for you, and you've possibly covered it, but what are the common cybersecurity mistakes that a sole practitioner might make?
Email.
As in, pretty much. So when you set up your practice, for example, you have options, right? So, and this is really interesting to me because I'm kind of in this technical. I'm not as a geeky as Mel. I'm a little bit more shady because I come from a shady sort of past. But when I talk about what really interests me on the entrepreneurial side is what actually matters and what actually doesn't matter. So I think there's context around, and what was the question again? I'm just trying to remember the question.
No, you're right. Common cybersecurity mistakes that a sole practitioner might make. So
when you get into this in your space, you buy your laptops or you buy whatever system you want to use, be it a Mac or it doesn't really matter, PC. Start a firewall, get a Nord VPN and a firewall. So that's a start, right? So it's the basics, and we're going to talk about that soon too. So getting the basics, you need a firewall. Firewalls we can build for you on your system. It's very easy. Get a VPN, go to Nord, get a VPN. Their subscription, $10 a month or something like that. But I think the biggest thing is knowing these things you can do. Multi-factor authenticate. So don't do a multi-factor authenticate on your SMS that we used to do. SMS is now breachable. Get a multi-factor into an app, be it authenticate from Microsoft or similar. Apps run completely different, and the apps you get off the App Store are securely tested. So the apps you get off the website, whatever, when they say, hey, send an app link on this, go and search for it on the App Store and get it through the App Store or Google, whatever store it is. I'm Mac guy at the moment. So, but things like multi-factor authenticate, right? I changed away from the dark side. Multi-factor authenticate, VPN, absolutely. Do not trust anything unless you own it. Unless you don't own it, don't trust it. Like if you go to McDonald's, are you going to plug into that Wi-Fi? No, then why would you plug into the motel Wi-Fi? Any free Wi-Fi is absolutely a disaster. You can guarantee it's breached anyway. So anytime you hook on, you've just completely compromised all your systems. Things like changing your passwords. Like don't haze your passwords. Buy a $5 key password safe thing on your internet. They do it anyway for free, so you can do that sort of stuff. But I appreciate the fact that not everybody's going to know how, why, and what to do. So I think the education, like Mel and I have been having this conversation for some time, the education and helping everybody here get an understanding of what we actually need to do collectively is where to start the ball rolling. So, yeah, it's the basics: passwords, passphrases, changing their multi-factor authenticate, VPN and firewalls are the baseline space.
That's great. Thank you very much, Neil. Look, we're probably on a little bit over time, but I think that was really valuable getting those insights there at the end. What I'd like to do is thank our panel members, Neil, Leslie and Mel. I think we've covered a whole lot of ground today, and I hope it was valuable for the people watching.